It began with an impossible silence. Inside the orbital fortress of Zoriah Prime, where engines roared like trapped beasts and war priests sang chants of steel, there was a second when everything came to a standstill. Screens went black. Alarms swallowed his own voice. Even gravity hesitated, as if space had forgotten to pull. And in that second suspended, Darien Core ran. The hallways were veins of polished metal, lit by crimson phyllis that pulsed to the rhythm of the reactor. Statues of ancient psychic lords lined alcoves, obsidian eyes watching every step with undying contempt. Zoriah Prime was built to crush wills, not to forgive them. Darien knew that weight in the bone. He had grown up there, trained to obey, to raise his hand and tear down worlds with a sharp thought. But that night, he was not an arm of the Empire. He was a thief against fate. He held the artifact wrapped in a conductive fabric tight to his chest, like someone carrying a fleeing child. What was inside the fabric was not just metal, nor just light. The star-blood blade slammed against his collarbone with a tiny wrist, like the heart of a sleeping beast. Whenever the fabric loosened, fragments of whispers invaded his mind. Ancient, overlapping voices, calling his name in 1,000 different ways. Darien, Darien, Darien Core. A promise and a threat at the same time. The plan was simple only on paper. Turn off the psionic pit safety ring, force a 30-second blackout on the reliquary wing, descend through a maintenance column, and steal the blade without looking back. No looking back was the only part that failed. Because when the alarms finally started breathing again, he heard the footsteps of the Palatine Guard echoing in the corridor above, heard the loading crack of the plasma carbines, and looked. He saw the pass coming with the force of an army. Commissioner Sevran Mal filled the ward like an icy wind. Deserter Core. Deposit the artifact on the ground and kneel. There is still use for you alive. Darien didn't answer. He tightened the package and turned to the containment window. Beyond the crystal, Zoriah Prime hovered over the pale blue of the garden planet Hiss, a luminous ring of bases and docks, breastplates and cannons. From there, the Zorian Empire sent decrees that bent civilizations. From there, the Blade Lords recited oaths on brains carved in silver. From there, he would flee. The first explosion shook the hallway. It was not his doing. Outside, an inspection frigate had crashed into the G7 dock. An accident that did not exist. Lyra Vane, Darien thought, with a smile that barely touched her lips. That captain of the Orphean Alliance had an annoying habit of being where she shouldn't be. If Lyra had caused the collision, it meant that the senses were distracted enough for him to attempt the jump. Last chance, Core, Sevran insisted, advancing with measured steps. Its chrome helmet reflected the red of the emergency lights. The blade is from the Empire. Everything belongs to the Empire. Darien tugged at the fabric, exposing a beam of red light that cut through the penumbra like first blood. The blade was not a sword in the human form of the term. It had no steel blade or conventional grip. It was an elongated fragment of living crystal, encrusted by filaments that resembled tendons of light. At the touch of the skin, he spread scarlet circuits across Darien's palm, as if he recognized him, as if he chose him. The guards retreated a step, pure reflex. Sevran, no. Insolent, the steward hissed, raising his left hand. The air vibrated. Psychic pressure crushed Darien's chest like a block of marble, pushing him against the wall. Veins throbbed in the corner of the vision. The world became narrow, without air, without sound. Kneel! The blade sang inside his skull. It was not sound. It was a memory he had never lived. Ancient hands holding up the same crystal under a sky that no map records. Silent crowds, planets like lamps. The voice that pierced through this memory didn't sound human, or like Zorian. It sounded like the very notion of authority. Stand up, broken air. Use me as a bridge, like a slit, as a key. Darien stood up. The pressure of the commissar crumbled like glass in the heat. The runner took another breath. The blade drew an arc of light and cut through the air with a crimson trail. A blow without metal, made of intention. The beam collided with the window's containment field and opened a bright scar on the crystal. something siege guns couldn't do without hours of continuous fire. Severin retreated 2 steps, not in fear, in calculation. You hardly understand her, boy. The blade was not made for you, but by you, and it takes its toll. Darian didn't want to hear any price. Ran. The glass gave way in a second blow. The impossible silence returned. A cutting pause. A sigh before the fall. The corridor was filled with wind. Metallic paper flew like birds. And then space swallowed him. Darian dove out of the fortress, the vacuum hugging his skin in a clash of needles. The escape suit closed seals as his body swirled over Hiss, the fortress a necklace of fire above, the docks lighting up like teeth. Below, orbital sentinels tracked the heat of the fall. Anti-ship beams cut through the void and missed by centimeters. On the left, a light ship emerged from the wreckage of the dock. Clean lines, faded blue paint, and the Alliance logo disguised under soot. Lyra Vane's voice cut the open channel like a cold blade. Hawk displaced. Anchor dropped. If you are what they say you are, grab it. A capture cable shot from the ship, snaking through the vacuum like a living rope. Darian twisted his body in the turn, calculating the timing by the reflection of light on the pulleys. The blade pulsed hot against his forearm, adjusting for it. He held out his hand. The cable hit hard, magnetized on the bracelet, and the pull almost tore off his shoulder. "We have you," Lyra said without celebrating. "For now." Behind, Zorian escort fighters tore through the orbit, angular wings spitting white fire. One of them dove straight over the Alliance ship, cannons heated. Darian, hanging from the anchor, turned his wrist and let the blade show a third secret. The cut he doesn't need to touch. An arc of blush pierced the space like a scar in the dark and tore off the fighter's wing. The debris whirled past meters from his head, a broken iron angel. "What the hell is that?" Lyra's voice rose half a tone. "I asked for a defector. You brought me a supernova. I only stole a sword," Darian said breathlessly, being pulled into the hatch. "And a death sentence with her." The hatch closed on his body. The pressure returned. The sound returned, and the smell of oil and ozone took over his throat. He fell backwards on the barred floor. Alliance crew members surrounded him with guns raised, eyes narrowed, and the readiness of someone who saw a lot of bad things up close. Lyra appeared over her shoulders, expression cut with a knife. "Captain Vane," Darian forced, still on the ground. "I didn't come to deliver anything to you. I came to take something from the Empire that can kill everyone. You and us." Lyra didn't blink. "And why should we believe in a Zorian with a mythical weapon in his lap?" The blade answered for him, not with voice, but with presence. A wave of cold and heat crossed the room and made the lanterns tremble and the rifles lose their aim for a second. Darian felt it inside, as if the blade opened his bones and saw who he was, who he tried to be, and who he could become. You can open portals. You can open graves. You can open the future or close the present. Choose, Darian Core. Gavion's monitors burst into warnings. The Empire locked the space around Hiss, preparing a siege ring. 30 minutes and no one would enter. No one would leave. Lyra looked at the map, then at the man on the ground, then at the living light in his hands. He decided in the middle of a sigh, "Take him to the bridge and attach this thing in 3 layers. She turned to Darian. "You just signed a pact, thief." "Me, and with death coming after you." Darian stood up, still dizzy. The blade was still hot, throbbing at the wrist as if it had its own breath. Outside, Zoriah Prime was pouring out fighter jets like a swarm. The void was filled with lines of fire. And in the heart of it all, an impossible silence awaited again. It was not the end of the escape. It was the beginning of the war. The first rule aboard Gavion was simple. Everyone bleeds the same. The second, no one trusts anyone until the ship crosses a blockade alive. On the bridge, Captain Lyra Vane repeated these rules like a silent mantra as the space around Hiss closed in rings of fire. The Zorian Empire erected an impeccable siege, breastplates in pincer formation. psychic cruisers projecting suppression cones, and fighters sweeping escape corridors. The kind of hug that broke ribs of entire fleets. Darien Core was handcuffed to the bridge's support column. Magnetic handcuffs, 3 layers, as Lyra had requested. The Starblood blade rested in a conductive case, attached to the floor with staples and field seals. Even so, the red light leaked through micro-slits, a breathing of embers in the dark. "Vectors?" Lyra asked, not looking at Darien. "2 corridors through the shadow of the debris belt," replied the pilot, Cade. "If we go in, we lose stabilizers." "Third vector," she insisted. The navigator, Miri's son, slid her fingers over the hollow. A short fold behind the earthy moon. But the Empire planted a psychic anchoring stick there. The fold would tear us in half. Lyra inhaled slowly. The Empire was not playing to arrest. I was playing to teach. No one steals a blade and comes out alive. She knew the lesson. What I didn't know was the thief. "Defector core," she said, finally staring at him. "If everything you brought was a problem, I can and will eject you from this case. But if you brought a way out, speak now." Darien lifted his chin. His face bore marks of Zorian Jim, a vertical scar on his eyebrow, and his eyes trained not to blink in front of cannons. Still, there was fatigue there. Fatigue of those who run on quicksand. "The blade is not just a weapon. It's a cutting key," he said. "Between 2 points it opens a thread, a furrow, a short portal. If we align the hoof with the furrow, the hawk crosses like a needle in fabric." "Makeshift portals split ships in half," Cade growled. "I've seen a frigate leave on the other side with half the crew outside." "Because they pushed with the thruster," Darien retorted. "The hull follows the field of the blade. It's different." Lyra did not like miracles, and even less miracles explained by enemies. But the siege was closing. On the hollow, Zorian formations began to twist the space, preparing the crushing cone. They had minutes. "Miri?" "Lyra." The navigator bit her lip. "If the blade can anchor in 2 clean spots, with a phase delta less than 0.02, perhaps. But we need 2 marks outside the psychic mesh, and the Empire covered everything." "Not everything," Darien said, and tilted his head to the window. There, the fracture of the G7 dock, and there, the shadow of the dead hull of the Sigma patrol. In the cracks, the psychic slips. Lyra studied him for a second that felt like a year. Then he nodded. "Unlock case. Miri, you will guide the level." Cade holds the hoof as if it were his father's throat. "Everyone else, stop what can be stopped. If it goes wrong, I want to die looking forward." The case opened with a field sight. The blade raised the light, as if standing on its own. Darien reached out, and the living crystal molded to his forearm, spreading flickering filaments under his skin all the way to his palm. The metal of the floor vibrated. Flashlights flashed in sync with his wrist. Hawkeye seemed to hear. "You call me, I open it," whispered the thing inside your head. "But every door that opens leaves a trace. Every passage has memory." "No poetry," Darien murmured. "Just give me a line." He closed his eyes. The entire bridge fell silent, except for the crackling of the panels. When it breathed, it did not breathe air. It breathed vectors. He saw the psychic staff as a spear buried in space. He saw the siege as invisible metal bars. He saw the 2 cracks like moist slits in stiff flesh. He raised his arm and made the first cut. Reality creaked. A thin, almost invisible thread stretched from the destroyed dock to the shadow of the dead patrol. The wire trembled, hungry for chain. "Now," said Lyra. Cade pushed Hawkeye with a surgeon's touch. It was not power, it was belief. To align the nose of the ship with the wire that only Darien saw. The farrier touched the edge of the furrow, and for a moment the hoof sang. The world stretched like hot rubber. There was a smell of copper in my mouth, a taste of lightning on my tongue, and the lights turned into comets. Then, the void moved around. They came out the other side, between the earthy moon and the dead hull. Behind, the crushing cone fell where they had been, crumpling the space like a fist. On the bridge, Someone laughed and cried at the same time. Lyra did not. Lyra was already looking at the next ring. "Again," she said. Darian nodded, but his hand trembled. The blade heated up like a fever. One more broken air, then rest, or the door will open on you. He cut it again. Hawkeye jumped again. 1, 2, 3 sequences. Each jump left an echo of pain in Darian's wrist, as if each vein of his complicity took a toll. On Wednesday, everyone's stomach turned inside out. On Thursday, the Empire realized the pattern. "Fighters in the vector!" Miri shouted. "They're mirroring the thread." The hollow showed angular wings projecting microcuts, trying to intercept the Darian groove. If they succeeded, they would open the same portal and come out side by side with Hawkeye, or inside it. Lyra felt the back of her neck freeze. "We need a long bend," Cade said in a low voice. "The baton will tear the ship," Miri countered. "I'll give the fold," Darian said, and as he said it, he knew he was telling the truth. "The blade can anchor beyond the staff, but I'm going to need something on your side, Captain." Lyra did not hesitate in almost anything, but she hated to give up control of her own throat. Still, she moved one step in his direction. "What?" "Confidence. Put down the shields for 3 seconds when I say. If you hold it, the fold bounces off the stick and cuts us. If opened, the blade goes through the stick like a knife in water." Cade widened his eyes. "Without a shield, in the middle of the siege, the shield creates resistance. I need the bare hoof." Darian met Lyra's gaze. 3 seconds, or we die anyway." Lyra tasted the risk. It was not courage, it was dirty mathematics. 3 seconds, he said. "In my touch." The Zorian fleet closed its jaw. The fighters mirrored the cuts like crows in the wake of fire. Darian raised the blade, and the red glow filled the bridge like a sunset inside a machine. He saw beyond, a black dot out of reach of the stick, an empty bay in space where the Alliance maintained a cold haven. A place called Nidus, a shadow. Nobody's home. "Ready," he said, and the ship itself held its breath. "Now." Shields down. The fields fell. The Hawk was naked, skin in the plasma wind. At the same moment, Darian opened a long cut, not a thread, but a groove like a scar crossing the sky. The hull dove, and reality roared. Panels exploded in a spark. Miri shouted coordinates. Cade seized the stick as if it were his destiny. Lyra kept her eyes on the void, because leaders do not close their eyes. In the siege, the fighters tried to mirror, and failed. Without the shield, the hull of the Hawk adhered to the cut like a blade in the case. Jumped. They left in silence, in a black expanse where there were only thin stars and a hollow asteroid with broken antennas. Nidus. The Hawkeye staggered, alarms crying in chorus. Shields returned by reflex. The space behind them bent a second too late. The crushing cone hit an empty place. The bridge breathed. Cade let out an embarrassed laugh. Miri hugged the terminal itself as if it were a friend. Lyra turned her head at Darian. He was too pale with sweat and blood on the corner of his nose. The blade, extinguished, like a sleeping animal after running too far. "You brought us to the other side," she said without embellishment. "For now," Darian murmured. "They will come. The Empire does not forget. And he touched the crystal lightly. Neither did he." Lyra nodded. "Then let's use the time we bought." He turned to the crew. Damage, life, air, reports popped up, stabilizers at the limit, a burning pipeline already contained, 2 injured, no deaths. Miracle in numbers. "Does Nidus have docks?" Cade asked. Miri pulled old files. "A pressurizable bay, dead but reactivable. Good antennas to send, nothing that risks it." "Perfect," Lyra said. "Let's hide Hawk in the asteroid bone and erase the trail. After, we decide what to do with our guest and his toy." Darian stared at the case, the blade asleep. Distant voices whispered, like waves crashing against walls of memory. Open doors charge tolls air. But they also show exits that no map dares to draw. He looked up at Lyra. "If you want to keep me alive, you're going to have to listen to me." The Empire does not want only the blade. He wants them all. And Tharvok, the warlord, already has another. He will come for me with a crown in one hand and a gallows in the other. Lyra held the answer for a second. Then he spoke the way he always spoke when the bridge needed ground. Then let him come. Here, everyone bleeds the same, and today we bleed together. In the void, Hawkeye swallowed his light and slid into Nidus. Outside, the galaxy was still lit, full of teeth. Inside, a war was beginning to choose their names. And Darien Core, bound by 3 layers and a red promise, understood that running away was no longer a verb in the dictionary of destiny. It was just a prologue. Orionis shone like a blue pearl under 3 rings of defense. Orbital platforms, ground batteries, and a collar of gravity mines formed the last shield of the Orphean Alliance in the eastern sector. For weeks, the population had slept with sirens in dreams. At dawn, when the Zorayan Empire arrived, dreams awoke. Hawkeye left Nidus with its hull dark, energy silent, and its trail erased. On the bridge, Lyra Vane watched the tactical map. Pincer Imperial columns, psychic cruisers in the center, dragging cones of suppression like invisible nets. The rings of Orionis had gaps. She knew war gaps. They were doors for funerals. Emergency traffic, warned Miri's son, the navigator. Evacuations are still in progress. The city, that in the southern hemisphere, millions. The Empire did not come to take it. It came to break, growled the pilot Cade. They want an example. Lyra nodded slightly and cut the open channel with the fleet. Here, Hawk. We returned with the thief and the blade. We don't ask for crowns. We ask for an impact sector. Overlapping voices, static panic, a sold-out commander. Sector Delta 9. We need to cut off the central psychic stay. If it falls, the platforms regain aim. Lyra looked at Darien Core, handcuffed to the bridge column, the Starblood blade strapped to his forearm in a conductive armband. He kept his head down, as if listening to something that no one else hears. You said you open lines, the captain said dryly. I need one up to the heart of the tweezers. Darien looked up. There was fatigue, but also a focus of steel. I open. But every cut demands me, and they learn to mirror. Then open it quickly. The sky of Orionis lit up. The first plasma salvos fell in green cascades over the outer ring. Alliance platforms responded late, targeting through psychic interference that twisted sensors. In coastal neighborhoods, windows shook with the distant roar. Children counted the seconds between light and shock, as if they were thunder. Vector! Miri pointed to the hollow, a column of Zorayan cruisers, protected by lateral breastplates, dragging the Astai, a column of mental energy that tied the crosshairs of the platforms, bending targets by illusion. Lyra took a deep breath. Hawk, low approach. Cade, nose on the floor. Darien. I know. Line. The blade heated up like embers in the bone. Darien closed his eyes and pulled out of nowhere a thin slit, a crimson thread that stretched from Hawkeye's hull to the shadow of the enemy column itself. The space creaked. Cade plunged the ship into the groove. For a second, Orionis jumped from his place. They came out from under the belly of the pincers, so close that the Hawk's cannons sweated with fear. Lyra did not ask for authorization. She ordered fire. The turrets spat ions at the base of the jib. Sparks of mental light danced like living dust. The cone faltered. It didn't break. Closer, Cade shouted. We don't have shields for that. Miri, then we have a blade, Darien said. He raised his arm and drew a cutting arc that did not touch the enemy hoof, but cut the psychic net itself, as if cracking ice. The Astai screamed in a vibration that ached in bones and silenced radios. The spine shook and staggered. The platforms of Orionis suddenly became clear. The outer ring woke up for good. Blue beams crossed the sky, blowing holes in breastplates. A platform spun its guns and hit the first cuirass on the Zorayan flank, which folded like brass. For seconds, the tweezers lost shape. It was the window. Alliance fleets in pairs now, came the general command. Delta 9, advance! In the southern hemisphere, civilians cheered a distant glow without understanding why. On board the Gavion, no one applauded, not yet. Zorian fighters swarmed under the column, protecting the wounded. They came as black blades, short vectors, and plasma eyes. They saw us, Cade said, without dramatizing. Lyra weighed in half a second. Cade, low streamer. Miri, data smoke. Darian, I'll cut it again. The blade throbbed. The next cut was not beautiful. It was cruel. Darian opened 3 short wires in a row, changing the angle before the fighters mirrored. The hawk slipped between his own cuts like a fish in a net that sows the water around it. 2 fighter jets collided, trying to follow the same line. A third fired at the right point. Cade turned his nose half a degree, and the salvo passed, licking the wing. Hawkeye's skin squeaked. Escudos at 12%! Miri, keep it, Lyra. This is going to kill us, Cade. I would kill if I asked for courage. I asked for technique. She pointed her chin at the target. Stay. Now. Hawkeye passed under the shadow of a psychic cruiser. Darian felt the mental pressure like a hand on the back of his neck, fingers going in behind his eyes. False memories sprouted in flashes. Him kneeling in the room of the Blade Lords, Lyra selling the crew for safe conduct, and Orionis already on fire. He bit his tongue, tasted real blood, and the fake world flowed out. Focus! He growled at himself. He opened the final cut. The invisible blade pierced the jib like a comma, cutting the sentence. The psychic spine broke. The cones have fallen. Platforms pointed without ghosts for the first time since the battle began. The sky turned into a blue storm. 2 Zorian cruisers burned from end to end, quietly, as if dying with dignity. Be knocked down, Miri shouted, without disguising her nervous laughter. On the wide channel, voices celebrated, cursed, and cried. Lyra didn't take her eyes off the map. The caliper pivoted, adapting. Zorians don't like to lose, he thought. Tharvok does not allow it. As if he had heard the silent name, a new signature appeared on the horizon. A psychic dreadnought, black-hulled, prow carved with ancient runes. At the top, a candle of crimson energy, the sign of the warlords. Tharvok, Darian whispered, ice in his stomach. The bow of the dreadnought opened like a mouth. A wave of suppression swept through the orbit, shutting down drones, drowning signals, and bending light. Platforms blinked. Alliance ships staggered. The sky seemed to tilt. He's got a blade, Darian said, sure in his tone. Another. I feel the singing. How many are there? Cade. Enough to crown an empire, Lyra replied dryly. And none to save cowards. Hawk, keep knife formation. We will hurt the king. Attacking a dreadnought with a corvette was madness. But madness, sometimes, is the only arithmetic that closes. The Hawk dived under the shadow of the giant. Turrets spat light. They barely scratched the hull. Cade took the ship into the turbulent wake of the crimson sail, where sensors jam and psychic locks skate. There, Darian could cut without being seen. Give me the sinew, Lyra asked, as if asking for salt on the table. The one who moves the monster's arm. Darian closed his eyes. The blade sang names that did not exist. He groped the void with his mind, looking for structural ligaments, the transfer points between the sail and the hull, the creature's nerves. He found one. Cut short, clean, and direct. The dreadnought shuddered. The candle flickered. The suppression wave failed for a second. The Orionis platforms took advantage and fired 3 shots into the flank. Smoke in a vacuum, a visible metaphor for pain. So, the answer. The crimson candle turned to them like an eye. Darian felt a hook stick in his mind, pulling back memories, breaking bridges and opening wounds. He saw Severin Mal smiling, he saw himself kneeling, and he saw Lyra dead. His hand faltered. The cut wire oscillated. The Gavion lost its line, hit a wave of turbulence, and spun. Alarms have exploded. We have you, Cade! Miri screamed, throwing stabilization vectors. Hold on! I'm holding on! Clenched teeth, Lyra took a step forward, almost touching Darian's shoulder. He didn't touch it. The command doesn't rest when the ground shakes. Come back to me, Kor. Go back to the board. He is not your future. It's just another monster with a toy. The voice broke through the fog. Darian took a deep breath, angrily attached the hook, and returned it. The blade shone like a crack of the sun in stone. He severed the second tendon. The candle went out for 2 full seconds. Enough. The inner ring spat a beam through the bow of the dreadnought. The giant bent, lost momentum, and slipped out of the pincer. The Zorians pulled a tactical retreat, not out of fear, out of calculation. Orionis breathed. In the southern hemisphere, windows stopped shaking. On the Gavion Bridge, no one smiled. The dreadnought had not exploded. Tharvok had not died. But the siege had broken his spine. The battle was not over. It had changed owners. Lyra turned her eyes to Darian. He was pale, with dried blood on his nose and the blade pulsing weakly. "Do you still have more lines?" he asked. He thought of the honest answer and gave it. "Today? 2, maybe 1. After, I'm going to delete it. Then let's spend it well." Lyra turned to the hollow. "Orionis holds for now. Next target, the Crimson Rift. If they retreat there, they regroup and come back bigger." Cade snorted. "Battle on asteroid field." "Very good. Where we breathe through stones," Lyra corrected coldly. He looked one last time at the planet. "Orionis keeps civilians underground. We will return when it can be a victory, not just a truce." The hawk turned its bow. Behind, the sky was still burning. Ahead, the Crimson Rift waited like a beast's throat. Darian closed his eyes, leaned his forehead against the hot crystal, and asked the blade not for miracles, but for margins. The war had a new rhythm, and in that compass, each cut was a heartbeat of the galaxy. The Crimson Rift was a graveyard of stars, a field of red, iron-rich asteroids, illuminated by the filtered light of a dying sun. Giant fragments rotated slowly, creating natural tunnels and dead ends. There, gravity did not obey the rules. Blocks dragged in silence, as if pulled by invisible wills. It was the kind of place where armies come in and never leave in one piece. The hawk entered the shadows of the crevice, as if diving into the mouth of a predator. On the map, the remnants of the Zorian Empire gathered forces, wounded cruisers, frigates, and Tharvok's dreadnought, still whole enough to be a threat. Every minute, more fighter jets emerged from makeshift docks, like ants coming out of carcasses. On the bridge, Lyra Vane watched in silence. Her face was a wall. He didn't let the crew see any doubts, but he knew. There, the Alliance could be lost. Behind her, shackled to his spine, Darian Kor held the Starblood blade, not as a ready-made weapon, but as a living thing that breathed along with him. Since Orionis, the crystal has not been silent. Each time he closed his eyes, voices echoed in his mind. Some screamed, others whispered. Some called him by name, others by the title he refused. Heir. That short night, lying on the stretcher in the infirmary, Darian dreamed, or believed he was dreaming. He walked on glass fields, with broken towers on the horizon. In his hand, the blade pulsed red, but the voices did not come from outside. They came from himself. "You are a child of the Empire. It's marked with blood. No matter where he runs, he carries every scar with him. You are a deserter, coward. He prefers to flee rather than raise a banner. He will never be the leader of anything. You are heir. Not of thrones, but of portals. It can open paths that no map dares to trace." He woke up sweating, with blood running from his nose. The blade, resting beside it, shone calmly, as if he had told a secret and waited for an answer. Hours later, on the bridge, Miri's son broke the silence. "The Empire has fortified the center of the rift. They are erecting a suppression network anchored in larger rocks. If they finish, they close their throats." Lyra nodded. "We have to cut it first. Darian?" He took a deep breath. "I can pave the way, but it's not just cutting. The blade shows places, not only in space but also in time. Echoes of what was, of what it can be. Cade, always suspicious, laughed in the corner. Now we have a prophet in the crew. Let it come with incense. Darian stared at him firmly. I didn't ask for that. I don't want to, but I can't turn it off. Every time I use it, it shows me something. And it's not just visions. They are instructions, as if it were conscious. The word hung in the air. Conscious. A sword that thinks. Lyra approached, looking straight at him. And what does she say now? Darian hesitated. The echo still burned behind his eyes. That Tharvok has another. And that together, the two can open more than cuts. They can open a crown portal. A rift wide enough to move an entire fleet in seconds. Heavy silence. Everyone understood what that meant. The Empire would not need more months to advance sector by sector. He could leap over worlds like a predator on chickens. Then we can't let it, Lyra said firmly. Cade, maneuver on the left flank. Miri, prepare data smoke. Darian, when I say it, it cuts the nerves of the network. He nodded, but his mind wasn't on the bridge. He was back on that pane of glass in dreams, where voices called him by different names. One of them, clearer than all, sounded like the blade itself. Do not be afraid to be chosen. Theme, not chosen. The battle began without trumpets. Imperial drones emerged first, gliding between asteroids like metal snakes. The Hawk and 3 Alliance frigates opened fire, blue beams cutting through the narrow space. Explosions reflected off the red surfaces, like thunder in caves. Then came the cruisers. Big, heavy, spitting green arches that made rocks break. The Alliance ships danced among fragments, hiding, reappearing, and firing. It was a war of shadows. In the midst of this, Darian felt the call. The psychic anchors of the network shone like eyes, stitching asteroids together with invisible chains. It was enough to cut it at the right point, and the throat would open. But the voices inside him didn't just make the point. They showed the consequences. If it cut to the left, it opened a fast path, but it condemned the frigate hidden there. If it cut to the right, it would spare the frigate, but the Hawk would be exposed to direct salvos. If it didn't cut, the net would close, and everyone would die together. Choose air, whispered the blade. Lyra noticed the distant look. Core! Target! He raised his gun. The blade sang a crimson beam that streaked through space, cut the central anchor. The crack echoed like airless thunder. The net faltered and broke in shaky lines. The way has opened. But, as he had predicted, a frigate on the left flank exploded in silence, broken by a counterpunch. On the bridge, no one said anything. War does not give room for elegies, just numbers. An open way, Miri announced. Hawk, advance, Lyra ordered. Hawkeye dove down the gorge, followed by Alliance ships. Behind, Tharvok's dreadnought adjusted the crimson candle. The other blade shone on the horizon, like an artificial star. Darian felt her beat her chest, in tune with hers. 2 voices now, dueling in your mind. Come, broken brother. Join me, and we will rule the gates of the galaxy. Darian closed his eyes for a moment. He knew that the war was just beginning, and the blade, attached to his arm, beat like the heart of a hungry beast. The Crimson Rift has closed its teeth. Asteroids the size of cathedrals swirled silently, casting long shadows over narrow corridors of vacuum. The Gavion's reflectors swept up iron dust suspended like red fog. On the horizon, Tharvok's dreadnought raised its crimson sail, a banner of living energy, and space seemed to tilt toward him. The Empire's other ships spread out in layers, forming an aggressive labyrinth. Cruisers in the wide pockets, frigates guarding rocky gorges, and fighters hiding behind gravitational folds. It was a fortress in motion. Enemy network adjusting vectors, Miri-san said, her fingers running over the hollow. They turned the rift into an org chart of death. Lyra Vane tilted her face to the map. Nothing new. Monsters build mazes when they are afraid. Cade, knife position. We knew the large shade and cut the small ones. Cade muttered a copy without taking his eyes off the glass. The hawk cut through the dust, gluing himself to the side of a massive block of hematite, so close that if there was air, they would hear the friction. Handcuffed to his spine, Darien Core pressed the Starblood blade against his forearm. The crystal was hot, almost feverish, pulsing in rhythm with his temples. Since Orionis, the weapon whispered words he didn't want to learn: portal crown, long wire, king's anchor. And ahead of you, another, more serious song vibrated, that of the blade of Tharvok, trying to tie your attention like a hook. The first attack came in silence, a salvo of micro-torpedoes that do not glow, they just go out. Zorian engineering coup. The Hawkeye's panel died for a second, restarting with spasms. "Side armor 2 scratched," said Cade. "More of this, and let's fly in faith." "Faith is bad fuel," Lyra replied. "Darien, take us out of his line of sight." Short wire. Failure to jump. Darien closed his eyes, hunting for cracks in the psychic mesh as if looking for cracks in the ice. He found a micro rift between the gravity of 2 blocks and opened a crimson thread the size of a corridor. Cade threw the rudder like a razor. The hawk disappeared and reappeared a kilometer later, belly laden with a Zorian cruiser. Hawkeye's turrets spewed out short-kissing ions. The cruiser ignited in a contained flash and broke into 2 smoking blades. "One less," Miri whispered. 5,000 more. In the wide channel, the Alliance advanced through 3 gorges. Makeshift frigates came in and out of shadows, exchanging fire with Zorian escorts on impossible turns. The rift transformed the war into a duel of reflexes. No long lines, no breastplate honors. It was a knife in an alley. The dreadnought, however, did not duel. He composed. Tharvok's crimson candle expanded like a lung. The surrounding space vibrated in harmonics that even the bones felt. Trails of light sprouted from antennas hidden on the asteroids, anchor points, converging in perfect arcs. On the hollow, Miri marked the vertices of the drawing. "He's drawing a crown portal," the voice came out thin. "If you close the geometry, you bring the fleet from the central sector in one jump. Orionis becomes an essay." Lyra looked at Darien. He didn't have to speak. "I know where to cut," he replied. "But it's not a line. There are 3, and the last one will be within range of the candle." "How close?" "Cade." Darien let the silence answer. "Too close." Lyra didn't calculate courage. She calculated cost. "Alliance, this is Gavien. Let's break the crown. I need noise in Quadrant 3. Anything that makes Tharvok look the other way." Answers popped up. "Copy. Let's bleed. For Orpheon, and no promises." One squadron deflected a giant rock with magnetic tugs, plunging it into a Zorian frigate. Another triggered seismic charges, raining metallic gravel on the dreadnought's sail. The crimson light flickered. "First cut," Darien said, and opened the wire at the base of an asteroid where a pillar of antennas was glowing. The crimson beam passed by, and the antennas went out like blown candles. The design of the crown faltered. It was beautiful, even if it failed. Engineers would love it, he thought, or they would die staring. "Second cut!" He pulled the line over a psychic energy cable that connected 2 smaller rocks. The cable broke. Drones guarding the apex broke course, confused. Tharvok's candle pulsed with anger. A wave of suppression swept through the throat, bending signals and mistreating the senses. The hawk staggered. Cade cursed as if praying. Miri spat out numbers until she found her way back. "Third vertex." Darien bit the word. The last dot shone under the dreadnought's shadow, so close that they could touch the hoof with a thought. "Let's go downstairs," Lyra decided. "Cade, sew the keel." No shield. "Without a shield," Miri. "The turbulence will kill us if the shield resists. Naked, the ship follows the wind." Lyra turned her face to Darien. "Short line." "Just one." He nodded. The blade burned his forearm like red-hot iron. "One, a broken air." And the toll booth then whispered. Cade dove in. The hull of the hawk passed meters of tapered rocks, descending the gorge like a knife in straw. The crimson candle above was a solid storm sky. Shocks bugged the panel. Lights died and came back. On the radio, voices shouted the names of saints and their dead. "Now! Lyra!" Darian opened the third cut and felt the world depart with him. The apex cracked. The design of the crown broke like glass in boiling water. Throughout the crack, antennas went out, cables disconnected, and the portal was not born. A second of silence. Then, the mute roar of the Empire. Tharvok turned the sail towards the hawk, like a sun choosing its target. The wave that came was not just suppression, it was revenge. Mental pain hit the crew's temples like a hammer. Miri fell to her knees. Cade lost the stick for half a second. The hawk scratched a rock, tearing off signs. Alarms screamed. "We're losing gate," Cade said through his teeth. "Shields at 0. Everything for maneuvering. Lyra." Darian cut a tendon from him. "Anybody." "He pulls me," Darian whispered, his eyes glazed over. "The other blade. He speaks as if he were my mother and my executioner. If I make a mistake, I cut us off." Lyra didn't scream. He only brought his voice closer to the ground. "We are not prophecy. We are crew. And our math is simple. Either you cut the monster, or the monster chews us up. Go back to the bridge, Core." The phrase broke the spell. Darian breathed. He searched with his mind for the nerves that connected the sail to the hull, transfer lines, machine muscles. He found one, thin, vulnerable, and hidden in the shadow of the dorsal ring. He raised the blade and drew a minimal, almost modest line. The dreadnought trembled. The candle faltered. For 2 seconds, the wave died. That interval was enough for the Alliance. 2 frigates emerged from the shadows and poured beams into the armor joints. A heavy cruiser, which had pretended to be out of order, opened its belly and threw a battering ram against the Colossus's flank. Dry impact. The armor deformed. Tharvok answered with merciless precision. A circular salvo swept down the corridor and swept the cruiser from end to end. The frigates fell silent in cold flames. Names fell on the channel and became static. The dreadnought did not bleed. He took notes. "We didn't win today," Miri said, her voice cracking. "We've won now," Lyra corrected. "Cade, snatch us from his altar." Darian, last line, not to attack, to leave. Darian wanted to say that he had no more lines, that each cut left a crack in him. But the blade stood up on its own, asking for heaven. He carved a short groove, hidden between the shadow of 2 blocks and the cold neck of an orphaned rock. The hawk dived, disappeared, and reappeared behind a barbed ridge. 2 other Alliance hulls followed in the vacuum of their jump, copying geometry through the smell of ions. The dreadnought's candle burst into light, searching for them. He didn't find it. Post-battle silence. Radio full of breaths. Lyra restrained the hand that wanted to tremble. Status. Shields burned, hulls scratched, 2 engines groaning, but alive, Cade. Alliance losses. Miri lowered her eyes. 4 frigates, 1 cruiser, and 7 squadrons. The portal did not open. "The anchors are dead." Darian slid down his spine to the ground. The blade cooled, finally. His nose bled. In his head, the voices fell silent, leaving behind a buzz, and in the background of the hum, a whisper that was neither him nor the weapon. "Tharvok, I wouldn't give up. The king does not forgive an affront before the court." Lyra looked one last time at the map. The crack was still full of teeth, but without crowning geometry. He turned to the crew. "Today we broke the crown. Tomorrow we break our necks. Tactical retreat to Shadow 3. Whoever can breathe, breathe. Whoever can cry, later." Hawkeye turned off its lights and glued itself to the dark belly of a rock. On the horizon, the crimson sail throbbed like the heart of a wounded beast. The battle was not over, but for the first time, the monster had had to give up a miracle. And sometimes, that's what saves a world. The silence of the Crimson Rift did not last. For days, the Alliance tried to hide in the shadows of the asteroids, patching hulls with iron plates and prayers. Hawkeye breathed hard, moaning with each maneuver. Crew members slept with weapons on their laps because they knew that the night did not belong to them. The Zorian Empire did not retreat. Tharvok didn't know the word give up. And when he returned, he brought with him not only fleets, but also ritual. At the edge of the rift, colossal antennas were erected from the wreckage of spacecraft. Rivers of energy flowed between rocks, drawing symbols that no one understood, but everyone feared. Space folded into concentric circles. It was as if the emptiness itself was carved out of lines of blood. "It's going to open," Miri's son whispered, her eyes glued to the hollow. On the bridge, Lyra Vane kept her voice steady, even though she felt her stomach tighten. "So we close it before it's complete." "Darian, you..." But Darian was already on his feet, the Starblood blade attached to his arm as an extension of the flesh. The crystal pulsed in tune with the circles in space, as if an ancestral voice called, "Come, broken air, join in. Don't fight the inevitable." He wiped the dried blood from his nose. If he closes the crown, he opens the way for 100 cruisers in one blow. Orionis will not be just theater. It will be rubble. Lyra took a step. "So you cut it first." "It's not that simple," Darian murmured. "The crown is not just geometry. It's will. He has a blade. Me too. It's a duel." Silence. Even the panels seemed to respect the phrase. The battle started like thunder. Alliance fighters leapt from the shadows, opening fire on antennas and cables. Frigates spewed improvised missiles that exploded into iron dust, trying to blind sensors. The Empire responded with ruthless precision. Zorian fighters swarmed in, shooting down each attack with coordinated bursts. Cruisers raised shields that reflected gunfire like mirrors of hatred. In the center, Tharvok's dreadnought hovered like a flying temple. The crimson candle expanded, lines of energy drawing the final circle. When it was completed, the crown portal would open. On the Hawk Bridge, Lyra ordered, "Cade, take us to the shadow of the Colossus." Miri, coordinate fire on secondary antennas. Darian, cut the center wire. He nodded, but the blade throbbed so much it hurt. Voices echoed like a choral of shadows. Some promised power, others threatened condemnation. They all called, "Open with me, Darian. Let the portal be born. Be the commander of the crossing." "No," he murmured, and held up the crystal. The crimson cut went through the space like a living scar, hitting one of the main cables. The light crackled, and fragments of energy dispersed like cold fires. The crown faltered, incomplete. But Tharvok answered. From the dreadnought, a crimson beam descended straight down on Hawkeye. It wasn't fire, it was mental pressure. The air vibrated. Crew members fell to their knees, crying for no reason, laughing unintentionally. False memories invaded them. Dead children, traitorous parents, and victories turned to ashes. Even Lyra staggered, leaning on the console. Darian, however, felt something else, the presence of the other blade. A deep, deep voice that offered no choice, only order. "You are my reflection. Come. Together, we will crown the eternal empire." He screamed, not against Tharvok, but against himself, against the temptation to accept, and the blade responded with force. A second cut opened, reaching the opposite vertex of the crown. Another bow broke. The net shook. The portal hesitated. "He's freezing!" Miri screamed. Tharvok roared inside everyone's minds. "Coward! You don't understand. The crown doesn't need you. I've had enough." And suddenly the crimson candle shone 10 times brighter. The second blade was forcing the drawing on its own. Even incomplete, the portal began to be born. Space tore in a circle, revealing not stars but even deeper darkness, a breathing void. Lyra grabbed Darian's shoulder. "Either you cut it now, or the galaxy ends." He looked at the crystal. I knew the price. Each cut tore off a piece of it. One more, and maybe there wouldn't be Darian Core to tell the story. But he also knew that there was no choice. He took a deep breath, and he opened the third cut. The crimson scar went through the heart of the circle. The portal screamed as if it were a living being. The lines cascaded, antennas exploded, fragments flew like iron rain. The void that opened up closed at once, spitting sparks. The crown was dead, but Gavion paid. The shockwave hit the ship head-on, ripping off panels, breaking cables, and throwing bodies against walls. Darien fell, blood dripping from his ears. The blade blacked out, like an exhausted beast. On the bridge, Lyra stood up with effort, leaning on the console. He saw the dreadnought still standing but limping, the sails swaying. He saw the Alliance ships retreating, but alive. He saw Orionis protected, for now, and he looked at Darien, slumped on the floor, his breath weak. He opened his eyes just enough to whisper, "I closed it, but it is not over. It never ends." Then he fainted, the blade asleep beside him, beating weakly like a heart waiting for a new beginning. The Crimson Rift fell silent. It was not a complete victory, but it was survival. And sometimes in war, that's all you can ask for. Tharvok's dreadnought wasn't just a ship. It was temple and throne. The Hawk, already too injured, crawled into its shadow like an exhausted fish seeking the shark's mouth. Lyra knew it was crazy, but she also knew there was no choice. If they didn't finish off the warlord there, the Empire would rebuild the portal, and this time, there would be no cuts to hold back. "That's the last line, Darien," Lyra said, her voice firm but her eyes heavy. "If you fall, the galaxy falls with you." Darien nodded. The Starblood blade burned in his arm, alive, pulsating, responding to the call of the other blade that vibrated within the dreadnought. It was like being pulled by an invisible tide. The body wanted to retreat, the blood wanted to advance. "Open the hallway," he asked. Cade launched Hawkeye into a suicidal maneuver, diving between batteries that spewed green fire. Explosions licked the hull. The spacecraft went through the belly of the Colossus and launched an insertion capsule. Inside it, Darien alone held the blade as if holding his own life. The capsule pierced armor and opened in an internal corridor. Artificial gravity weighed like lead, and the air tasted like burnt iron. Reptilian statues and psychic symbols covered the walls, reminding Darien that he was in the heart of the enemy. And at the end of the hall, Tharvok was waiting. The warlord was a wall of black scales, eyes golden in embers, the other blade stuck to his arm like a living crown. His crystal was not red but deep crimson, like clotted blood. When he vibrated, the ground shook. "You've finally come, broken air," Tharvok said, his voice sounding like thunder inside his mind. "The Empire does not waste time with deserters, but you're not just a deserter. You are a door, and doors can't choose." Darien raised his blade, which lit up in response. "Doors open and close. Today I close yours." The duel began. The two blades collided, and space groaned. There were no metallic sparks. There were waves of reality that bent, as if the universe were fabric pulled in opposite directions. Each blow created fissures in the air, revealing fragments of other places, glass deserts, black seas, and burnt stars. It was like fighting inside a broken dream. Tharvok attacked with imperial fury. His cuts were heavy and precise, like hammers that wanted to crush more than they killed. Darien responded with quick, instinctive, almost desperate movements, but the blade guided him. It was not technical. It was survival transformed into art. Each time the blades met, voices echoed in Darien's mind. Some came from the enemy weapon. "Unite. Together we can crown the galaxy." Others came from her. "Don't inherit the night. Choose freedom." The fight progressed down the corridor, breaking walls and cracking symbols. Statues shattered under the pressure of the blows. A panel exploded in sparks, spewing silver smoke. "You can't take it!" Tharvok roared, striking with a force that pushed Darien against a column. "You bleed with every cut. I am the rightful heir. You're just a failure." Darien spat blood but kept the blade up. "Maybe I'm flawed, but failure is still a choice. And choice is what the Empire fears." It spun around, cutting low, opening a fissure in the ground that swallowed half of a staircase. Tharvok leaped in, landing like a beast. The two collided again. Meanwhile, outside, Hawkeye and the rest of the Alliance kept the dreadnought busy, attacking their defenses with suicidal courage. Frigates exploded, fighters scratched the hull like flies against a beast. Lyra saw everything in the hollow, but she knew that the real battle was not on the outside. It was inside, where Darien was fighting alone. "Hold on, thief," she murmured. "Hold on until the universe decides to listen to you." In the heart of the hallway, Darien was on the edge. The arm burned, the muscles screamed, and the mind shattered with each psychic impact. Tharvok didn't seem to get tired. He seemed to grow. His blade roared in chorus with his voice, and the air grew heavier and heavier. Darien fell to his knees. The crystal pulsed weakly. The enemy raised his blade for the final blow. "Now, choose." The voice of his blade was not a scream. It was whispering, almost tenderly. "Do not fight as an heir. Fight as a free." Darien closed his eyes and didn't raise his gun to block. Instead, he plunged the blade into the ground. The cut was not against Tharvok, but against the ship itself. A crimson slit opened under his feet, tearing the heart of the dreadnought. Energy exploded in a cascade. Walls shattered. The Colossus trembled. Tharvok roared in hatred and fell along with the cracked ground. His blade screamed and faded into the void. Darien was swallowed by the light. Outside, the dreadnought twitched. The crimson candle exploded silently, launching fragments that lit up the crimson rift like a contained supernova. The Empire's fleet faltered. The Alliance moved forward, tearing up what was left. On the Gavion Bridge, Lyra clenched her fists, but did not smile. He knew what it meant. The sacrifice needed no translation. In the last moment before the Colossus shattered, Darien felt the blade speak one last time inside him. "You didn't inherit. You chose." And then, silence. Tharvok's dreadnought was remembered as the shadow that nearly crowned the galaxy. When his crimson candle exploded and the fragments lit up the crimson rift, many believed they were witnessing the end of an era. The Empire's fleet faltered for the first time in centuries. They did not retreat out of fear, but out of calculation, because without the king there was no coronation. And so, the Alliance survived. In Gavion, heavy silence took over the bridge. No crew member spoke when sensors showed that Darien's capsule had not returned. None of them searched for words. Lyra kept her eyes fixed on the hollow, because she knew that if she blinked, tears would fall. He had entered alone, and alone the universe had swallowed him up. The news spread faster than the radio waves allowed. In Orionis, murals were painted that same night. On Mars, children heard for the first time the story of the defector who refused to be king and chose to be free. Among the Tsar, priests raised his name in temples, calling him Tsar Rok, the one who devours his own death to feed others. But no title did it justice. For Lyra, Darien was neither hero nor martyr. He was a man, stubborn, tired, broken, but real. He died without asking for crowns, only choosing to cut through the darkness that called him. The Starblood blade was not found among the wreckage. Some have sworn that the crystal dissolved along with the dreadnought. Others said it still pulsates in some corner of the crack, waiting for another hand. Legends were born quickly, as they always are when the truth is greater than silence can hold. Months later, the Alliance consolidated its position. There was no peace, but there was time. The mixed patrol ships, human and Tsar, crossed sectors where there was only hatred before. In each crew, someone told the same story in a low voice. That of the deserter who closed the crown portal, who refused to be heir. Lyra, in writing his final report, left only one sentence in the Alliance archives. He did not open the galaxy, he kept her free. And so, the name Darien Kor stopped being that of a fugitive and became that of a choice. Not because he won, but because he didn't let the universe choose for him. In the memory of the stars, this is enough.